bulletproofing your body doing weird shit in the gym. Now, about a year ago, we had an internal education with my team at Third Space Moorgate, and we were doing something called plyometrics. Now, we'll dive into what that is, but we were doing some plyometrics, and let me tell you, I was terrible. Everyone was laughing at me. It was a traumatic experience. I could barely get off the ground. The way my body could organize itself was just disgusting. There was no coordination, and it was literally laughable. You can also go onto my YouTube channel and search for single leg hops, and you'll see what I mean about how poorly I organize myself and things like that. Fast forward to today, and I'm a little bit better. And this is that journey of being bad at things and then becoming better at them, and my process of understanding everything about it in order to kind of reap those rewards and pull it back in. So plyometrics, it's basically jumping up and down continuously, quickly. Not box jumps, not other things. Plyometrics, that's what we're talking about today. They're fantastic for training your tendons and ligaments, the parts that connect the muscles to the bones and the bones to the bones. And you need energy to go through there. You need force to go through there. You want those things to be strong. You want those things to be coordinatable. You want those things to be powerful. Get good stuff out of them. And it's missing from so many people in the gym, including myself. I never really did that much jumping around. As you could, if you were in that education a year ago, you would have been able to tell it was awful. But what we're going to talk about today is why these things are useful, why plyometrics are useful, what is it, how you should do it, the different types, and how many of them you should do. So first of all, why it's useful, because this is the most important thing to me, is like, I'm not going to tell you everything about them if you're not interested in why you're doing them, like why even start jumping around the gym, because people feel weird doing it. It's the one thing my clients feel the weirdest doing, jumping around in the gym, because we don't do it in society. Kids will do it all the time. Hopscotch outside, best plyometric example in life, but we don't do it. Is when you get older, you stop jumping, you lose these qualities, and everyone is tearing their LCLs, ACLs, everything is getting destroyed. So this kind of stuff can potentially help you avoid those kinds of injuries. So the main thing with plyos, for me, that reaps so much. It's such a low-hanging fruit because it works on the physical qualities that so many people are missing, and that's the elastic qualities. People in the gym train hard who lift weights. They don't have these key elastic qualities that you need for sport, for running, if you're going to fall, to catch yourself landing, these kinds of things. You get some of it from lifting weights, but it's on the other end of the spectrum with regards to physical qualities. You've got like muscular qualities and elastic qualities, aka tendon cartilage qualities over here. And lifting weights is up in this muscular end. That's why you build muscles from doing it rather than massive tendons. Go down to the other end, you've got more tendon focus. That's what we want to kind of yield and reap the rewards of here. So no one's doing these things in the gym to reap these kinds of physical qualities of being elastic. And what even is elasticity? It's just basically like, how well can you transfer force? How well can you manage forces quickly and repeatedly? For example, if you just jump straight up and down with no prior jump, you're just standing still and you jump up, you will not be able to get as high as if you do a short depth jump. If you jump off something and then jump up, you'll be able to jump higher. That's the nature of these elastic qualities. And that's due to your ability to coordinate and use the forces, manage the forces to produce more force and get higher. So that is what these elastic qualities are really good at. And it helps you develop tendon and joint stiffness. So this is stiffness as a quality of desire is very rarely talked about in the public. Stiffness is definitely associated with being a negative thing, but you want to create a stiffness around the joints. You want the muscles around the joints to isometrically contract. You want them to hold still so the tendons can go through a range of motion and the tendons can contract and relax. That's what we mean with joint stiffness. Muscles stay isolated and the tendons do the work, and that's how you get these nice bouncy elastic qualities. You see, basketball players aren't exactly the most muscular people in the world, but they have enough muscular strength so their tendons can do loads of work. So their tendons will be very, very developed because they're the people, that's the sport that uses these elastic qualities in a massive way throughout. These elastic qualities are missing from so many athletes and individuals. Athletes and individuals. So ticking this box of getting some plyos in, it gives you more physical qualities, makes you more robust as a human being. I'm just going to take a sip of coffee, bear with me. As well as, it's useful to become better at plyometrics because you get better at managing energy. As I've said, dynamic nature, use energy from the landing for the takeoff rather than having to produce it again from the muscles. It's efficient. If you want to run better, if you want to be more efficient with your running, you need to get better at plyometrics because each step you take, rather than your muscles doing all the work, your tendons can take over and do a little bit more, which is a much more efficient way of running. What I mean by that is it costs less energy. So you can run faster for longer, and your muscles, your tendons, your musculoskeletal system won't be a limiting factor. Might still be your cardiovascular system, but it's improving the quality of your musculoskeletal system. So those are a few things why you want to do plyos. And just to give you an idea, search what a plyometric is. It's just hopping up and down. If you're following on the gram, which you should be, you'll see me doing them rather often. Yes. And what is a plyo? Like, what is a plyometric? So the official thing in the literature, how it's like described, and this is a bit, everyone's got a different opinion here, but this is what the most modern, up-to-date literature shows. You need a takeoff and a landing. So that's why a box jump isn't best, because I'll actually go into further detail. So a box jump isn't a true plyometric because of another thing I'm about to say, which is reflective involuntary mechanisms. So a box jump, you just take off and you land, but it's not repeatable. It's not repeated. So when you repeat these takeoffs and landing back and forth, you use a reflexive involuntary mechanism in the body, which is this elastic tendon work. So you're not conscious of that. Whereas maybe with a muscular contraction, you're a bit more conscious. With these, because they're so explosive in nature and they're a shorter time period, the takeoff and the landing have to take under 0.25 seconds to be an official plyo. We are going to talk about how this changes in some forms of plyometrics, and it doesn't have to be super strict, but just around that number, and you can get an idea that these things generally want to be quite a reactive thing. So you're hopping up and down with timing and rhythm. And I would look at sprinting, look at 100-meter sprinters, watch them go. Few things to take away so far when you watch them. Their face will be very, very relaxed. The joints, however, will have a good amount of stiffness in them. There won't be huge changes in the joint angles throughout the running, particularly at the knees. When their foot lands, they're quite stiff and reactive and elastic. That's how they're able to produce so much force. They are muscular. They are muscular, the 100-meter sprinters, but they also have these thick tendons. You need that muscle to create the isometric at the joint. You need the muscle to be stronger when there's more force and you're moving faster. There's going to be a more amount of force, so it can keep that joint stiff and the tendons can do the work, taking the eccentric load and producing it into concentric quickly through that tendon. They're also very reflective. The foot's not on the ground for a long time. And now, where the foot lands. Now, this is also quite important. So when you're doing these plyos, go out and give them a shot. We're going to talk about how many jumps to do. You probably want to start with about 40 jumps, 40 landings per week, and you can build up to over 300 plus. So we're not being soft here. You got to do a lot of jumping if you want to get good at this stuff, but ease into it because most people haven't done it and they're shit at it like I was last year. And for you to progress and get better, you need to spend the time doing this good quality work. So where do you want to land? Now, some people say the heel shouldn't touch. Some people say you should land on your toes. You pretty much want to land on the transverse arch. Now, what does that mean? It's just behind the ball of the foot, or kind of at the end of most shoelaces. So if that's your foot, you kind of want to land there, front, just behind the toes. And that's where you're going to get the best thing. But you do want a full foot landing. So a few things. You want the full foot landing. Generally, you want the foot to land under the hip when you're doing it. So you don't want it too far out in front, to the side, whatever. There are different variations that you'll do to train different qualities. And naturally, in a lot of sports, you might not be perfectly under the hip. So it's good to train those kinds of unusual positions. But for training generally, foot lands under the hip, nice full foot landing. So you're landing on that transverse arch, but you probably want the heel to touch the ground slightly. Why? If the heel is too high up, there's going to be too much force going through the Achilles. And that can say, if you keep the heel a little bit lower, there's less force that goes through the Achilles, and you want to, again, share the force, as I always talk about, share the force across the whole system, rather than just putting it all through one joint, one ligament, one tendon. So, you want a full foot landing generally with the foot under the hip, so not too far out in front of you or behind, just like you would with running, and land just behind the ball of the foot. Now, different types of plyos. Naturally, you've got your two-footed jumps, or hops, you could call them. No, bounds, sorry. Two-footed bounds. So the way I like to categorize everything with training, and this is principles that you can apply to plyometrics, weightlifting, sports, everything. I look at it in terms of stance. So you can have a bilateral symmetrical stance where you've just got your 2 feet kind of down under your hips, as basic as it can be, the kind of position you'd be in when you're square on. Think of American football players square on. That's a bilateral stance. 2 foot planted on the ground next to each other symmetrically. So you're looking nice and square on. You've then got split stance, which is where you've got staggered. So 1 foot in front, 1 foot back. And unilateral, so single leg. With split stance, you can do different variations. You can do like a frontal variation, or you can do a front to back, and you can obviously move that other foot elsewhere in that circle. So there's a bit of room for error there. You can kind of move around a little bit. So I think of the body, the available space the body can move in, as a 3D area. Bilateral is very straightforward because you're just next to each other. Split stance, you can kind of move this other foot anywhere around, but generally the point is you're not symmetrical. You're either front to back or side to side, but you've got a bit more weight on one foot than the other. Whereas bilateral, you've got a similar amount of load on both feet. Unilateral being one leg at a time. Those would be your hops. So now we've got the stances covered. Now we're going to talk about types of jumping. Now this honestly messes me up at the start. I was thinking about this just for too long because I hadn't actually sat down and done the thinking and figured out what's going on. Because some people call things jumps, skips, X, Y, Z. To simplify it, Matt McInnes-Watson's PhD, he's tried to categorize everything quite nicely. So you've got your hops, your bounds, and your leaps. So leaps are just your normal jumps. Your bounds are where you change from one leg to the other, and your hops are where you go from one leg to that same leg. I think. You can double check that, but that sounds pretty good to me. So instead of jumps, it's a leap pretty much. A leap just being 2-footed, repeated over and over again. A bound 1 foot to the other foot, kind of like you're bounding across a meadow, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. And then hops. I've put hopes here on my notes, so it's throwing me off. I need to remove the E. Hops. And that's where you're just staying on the same foot. Right, 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 up and down, finding that tempo, finding that rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. And then you've got your different tiers. Now, this is very important, and this is a spectrum. All of these, this is a spectrum. So with the tiers, it starts off with a light, extensive plyo. and it goes all the way up to a deep yielding plyo. It's a spectrum, and it's also a quadrant. So it's two spectrums. And on either side of the spectrums, you've got extensive and intensive, and you've got yielding and overcoming. You also have the type of plyo, the tier. I'm going to go there. So some of this has crossover, but you can tick a lot of boxes here. This is getting over my head, but we're going to keep going and we're going to dive in and learn together. So you've got these light extensive, which is where everyone should start. It's basically the most easy little leap up and down on the spot, finding some rhythm, finding some tempo, doing 10 little jumps, 4 sets, building up that capability. Extensive as in you can do a lot of work and it's not too intensive, which would be the other side of the coin. So extensive, light, easy work. And you can start that with your bilateral stance, doing leaps, little jumps on the spot, light, extensive work. Once you've become competent with those, and by competent, I mean you can keep your face relaxed, you're nice and elastic, you're getting reasonable reactivity off of the feet, up and down, and you feel competent doing it, coordinated. Might take 1 or 2 weeks for some, might take a bit longer, depending on the age and loads of other factors. Once you're competent with these light, extensive plyos, you can move on to medium, where you're looking for a little bit more height in each leap or bound or hop. It's a medium tier, you can push it a little bit more. And then ping tier was where you're going all out and you're trying to get max height or max horizontal distance. So you're looking for max height or max distance each plyometric. So each takeoff and landing, you're looking for that. You're attacking the floor to create that reactive energy, to create that energy coupling. So you're using that eccentric landing force and stiff muscle tissues to create that overcoming concentric force and getting maximum height. So ping tier is basically when you're going all out. Check out the gram for that. That's when it gets difficult, and I would really recommend taking your time, slowly building up to this. So these qualities of tendons and ligaments tend to take a little bit longer to build up. So you're probably looking at about 6 months. So it's like a year since I feel like I'm relatively competent. And across that year, I had like Achilles flare-ups. I did a patella issue, but it's like nothing even worth talking about. Like you get these things because I'm... Sorry for interrupting the pod. I'm just here to advertise the programs. A couple programs in the link in the bio, in the link tree. Hypertrophy program if you want to get jacked out of your nut. And the fundamentals program if you're a bit bored of your training, you want to mix it up, you're fed up of just lifting weights in the gym, and you want to come a little bit more athletic. Dive into the link tree and get involved now. Learning and you fail and you do it badly until you realize how to do it better, where to land, where to find that timing, where to find that rhythm. And then, so we've got light, extensive, medium, and then ping tier, which is more intensive. So those are your kind of main ones. But on the other side of that, you have this deep tier plyos. Now, this is the kind of stuff that yields loads of reward for Olympic lifters. Deep tier plyos is, you can do these extensive and intensive. So this is where I've messed up a little bit earlier. Deep tier is kind of its own area. And why? Because it's not a true plyometric. Because generally, with the extensive ones, when you're really yielding, spending a bit more time in those deeper joint angles, your takeoff and landing is taking over 0.25 seconds. So it's not a true plyometric, but the qualities you develop are still worth talking about and still in this kind of realm of training. So what is a deep yielding plyo? A deep tier plyo is basically where you've got bigger joint angles, you're taking more time on the floor, it's a bit more muscle biased, a bit less elastic, and it's teaching you to be comfortable in deeper joint angles. Think bottom of a squat, think a lunge, so you're doing lunge jumps, you could be alternating, you could be doing squat jumps moving forward, you could be squat jumps moving side to side. We'll talk about direction in a second. But deep yielding, if you're a weightlifter, honestly, if you're everyone, try and get them in. Those are fantastic for just building confidence, building mobility when you're on this extensive side of the spectrum. And again, building up to intensive if you want to be better at Olympic lifting, catching a heavy barbell under speed and producing force out quickly from those deep bottom of the squats. Deep tier yielding plyos reap so many rewards. And then lastly, so we've got your stance, bilateral, split squat, unilateral types. You've got your bounds, your leaps, your hops, your tiers, light, medium, ping tier, extensive to intensive, your deep yielding, again, from extensive to intensive, and then we've got direction. So how are you moving? I'd recommend starting just on the spot, nice and easy. You can also do some transverse, like rotational, side to side. And then once you're comfortable there, I would actually start with going backwards. So backwards leaps, backwards pogos. It makes it easier to get a nice full foot landing and landing on the right spot. Then from there, forwards, and then you can go frontal plane. So medial, so inside towards that working leg, and lateral, away from that working leg. The two types of frontal, just side to side effectively. Keep it simple. And then what we're going to talk about is the volume. So how much should you be doing here with these plyos? You're looking at about 40 when you're starting off per week, 40 landings, all the way up to 300. Now that's when you've put in a good amount of work and you can take the load. Naturally, if you've got quite an explosive sport where you're jumping around a lot and your tendons and ligaments work hard, such as tennis, such as jumping, such as basketball, you might want to pull this back a little bit. If you're not, you can push it. If you're just training plyos and working out in the gym, I'd recommend after about 6 months of doing these, you're probably doing some weeks at about 300. Use your common sense. If things are getting sore, pull it back. If things are feeling all right, keep pushing. And once you feel comfortable, you have to push these. If you want to get better, you have to attack the floor to get that nice elastic qualities, to get that coupling of energy, to really get high and become a better jumper. You need to put in that intense work in these different stances, different types, tiers, directions, volumes. Bulletproofing your body, doing weird things in the gym. Plyometrics. I hope you got some value here. Drop me some messages if you have any questions. Thank you for Matt McInnes Watson for all the work you've done. Hope you have a good day. Goodbye.